In my mind, this Cat McCormack character, sorry, I should use the right expression, representative, is just there to get attention. Whatever she does, she's always thinking about, can she get some attention? It's like trying to get a like on social media. She's getting some buzz out of it. Whereas Jasmine Crockett is there to represent, always sticks to the facts, puts over an argument in a very interesting and relatable way. So I'll let you choose. Out of the two, who are you going to pick? It's not difficult.
Joe Biden.
Thank you.
Joe Biden.
Thank you. This is amazing. Unanimous. Joe Biden won in 2020. So when people start posting things like Joe Biden didn't win on social media, to the extent that as we're talking so much about polling, because we're headed into the 2024 election, we have so many people that don't believe that Joe Biden won the election, and most of them tend to be on the other side of the aisle. It is because there was misinformation and disinformation that was put out over and over on social media. Now, let me try to see if I can ask you another question and see what kind of answers we get. This one is a little trickier. Did the COVID rate of deaths decrease after the vaccines were released or increase after the vaccine was released?
Decrease.
Decrease.
I'd have to review the data, but are you just talking about the COVID rate of deaths or all excess mortality?
No, the COVID-related
I
deaths.
believe that the COVID-related deaths declined, but in the Delta period, I'm not sure. That's why I'm hesitating.
Thank you so much.
They declined.
They declined by approximately 90% in the first 6 months.
Well, I love that data right there. Thank you. Okay. All right, so here's the deal. I'm annoyed by this hearing because, number one, it is Groundhog's Day all over again. We have had some version of these hearings, and we've talked about misinformation, disinformation, and I do want to make sure that we understand what it means to have a First Amendment protection. So I am going to start over here. When we talk about the Constitution, for those that don't understand how it works, is it limitless and there's no restrictions to any of our constitutional rights?
No.
It's not limitless, is it?
No.
In fact, I know that my colleagues believe there's no limits to the Second Amendment, and it sounds like they believe there's no limits to the First Amendment, but I remember when Trump got banned from Twitter, and that probably saved the country. Nevertheless, it at least would have saved him some money, because right now he just got caught up in court for, never mind, we're not going to talk about Truth Social right now, but there are limits on the First Amendment and what can be done. So number one, let's talk about who the actor has to be. The actor, when we're talking about the First Amendment, has to be the government, correct?
Correct.
All right, and if we're talking about actions of the government, which there's allegations of some nefarious thing that was going on behind the scenes where the government is really co-opting social media, and so therefore they are the government actors, can you talk about some of the things that are limited? Are acts of violence okay to limit under the First Amendment?
In certain circumstances, yes.
Okay. What about libel or slander?
Again, in certain circumstances, yes.
Okay, so flat out falsities that can potentially cause harm, they also could be limited too, huh?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, so now we know, even though we're talking about social media, which last time I checked is not run by the government, we know that First Amendment rights can be limited. But what is so interesting about this hearing is that basically what the Republicans are arguing for is carte blanche. We should be allowing anybody to say whatever, and that's how we get so much Russian propaganda. I was able to produce some that was spread by one of my colleagues in another hearing. This is the problem. This is why China is coming after America. This is why we see the Russians coming after America, because we have people that will continue to spread their lies, and in spreading their lies, they're causing harm to Americans instead of these people in this chamber doing what they are supposed to do, which is to protect the American people and use the Constitution, because not every country has a Constitution that protects the people. And so I would like that this party stop peddling Putin's lies and focus on making sure that we can put forth truth that we can all respect and understand. And with that, I will yield.
Yields. Gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized for 5 minutes.
Wow. I'd just like to read a headline from today. The CDC lied about COVID vaccine deaths, files show. So while I appreciate the hero complex of Mr.
Now, did you take an oath to the United States Constitution when you assumed this appointment?
Yes, Congressman.
Perfect. And you're familiar with the First Amendment?
I am.
Can you please outline the 5 tenets of the First Amendment for me?
Congresswoman, I'm not going to be able to do it off the top of my head, but generally the First Amendment relates to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and off the top of my head, I'm not able to recall all of the planks.
Oof, well, that's disappointing and a little embarrassing, but not surprising considering what we're dealing with here today. Now, I certainly wouldn't expect that someone who cannot outline the basic tenets of the First Amendment to uphold the Constitution, of which you took an oath to defend, but here we are today. Now, you said multiple times here that you cannot recall certain conversations, communications, correct?
Congresswoman, I left the White House almost a year ago. These discussions happened more than 2 years ago. Certainly there are a number of discussions related to this that I'm not able to recall.
Okay, so you agree that you have said multiple times here you cannot recall?
Congresswoman, yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. And I'm so glad that we have receipts, because we have come with receipts. In fact, all of your emails from that time. So we're going to help you recall some of these conversations. On February 6, 2021, at 9:45 p.m., we love our timestamps, you emailed Twitter to demand immediate removal of a parody or imposter account linked to Biden's adult daughter. You stated, quote, "Please remove this account immediately." Then you went on to say, "I have tried using your form 3 times and it won't work. It is also ridiculous that I need to upload my ID to a form to prove that I am an authorized representative of Finnegan Biden." Now, 2 minutes later, at 9:47 p.m., Twitter responded right back to you. "Thanks for sending this over. We'll escalate for further review from here." Mr. Flaherty, do you recall this exchange?
Congresswoman, I do recall that exchange.
Okay, so you still stand by how you have handled this situation in making it clear that you needed action immediately from a social media company?
Congresswoman, the White House Office of Digital Strategy absolutely has an equity in protecting the president's grandchild from online harassment and impersonation.
Sure, I would expect nothing less, but I'm just saying there's a common theme here, right? So you then escalated a little bit more, and within that same minute, so literally 60 seconds, cannot stress the degree to which this needs to be resolved immediately. 45 minutes later, at 10:32, Twitter responded, "Here's an update, the account is now suspended." Now, the next day, February 9th, you followed up with an email to Facebook with a demand for more information and an accusation that Facebook's failure to, quote, "censor speech on its platform is causing political violence." Those are your words. Causing political violence. Do you believe that the failure to censor Americans' First Amendment, constitutionally protected speech is considered political violence?
Congresswoman, I don't remember the specific email in question. I'm happy to take a look at it and observe the context, but I don't recall what you're referencing.
Well, and I will say I am disappointed because we have presented receipts here today, but we have also shown how timely you have been in engaging at all hours of the night with social media companies during your tenure as a representative to the highest levels of the White House. Again, your words. Despite the fact that earlier my colleague, Representative Gates, was trying to clarify who is we that you speak of, you say in your emails that you represent the highest levels of government in the White House. But I find it ridiculous that it took us over a year for you to appear before this committee. In fact, it was after you actually missed your deposition, refused to show up. We had you scheduled in January and then again in February of this year, and you chose not to appear. Now, is it safe to assume that in your role as the deputy campaign manager for the Joe Biden re-election campaign, that you speak on behalf of the campaign or the President of the United States?
Congresswoman, I'm here to discuss my interactions with social media companies when I worked at the White House from January 2021 until June 2023. I'm not here to discuss the campaign.
So but you're basically saying that you don't speak for President Joe Biden or his campaign, and you didn't speak for him during your time at the White House. So either you have completely misrepresented your role, or you are trying everything possible to make sure that your correspondence with social media companies directly threatening, coercing these companies to silence Americans who disagreed with the political agenda of the Biden administration happened.
Congresswoman, I'll note I'm here voluntarily to discuss my discussions with social media companies while I was in the White House, and I'm happy to answer those
But a
questions.
year late and a dollar short. So with that,
Simon.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to be clear that the witness did appear to testify on the date that. Yeah. But I just want to thank you all for being here, for saying what your beliefs are, your recollections, as you can recall them, were. I think it's interesting that we are discussing free speech, and yet this committee is censoring speech and giving the American people only a slice of information that they want them to see. And they're trying to use the guise of, we don't want our other witnesses to know what we're going to be questioning people on, is the excuse to why they won't give the American people the whole truth. They're going to say there's coercion, but there's evidence of no coercion. They don't want to put that forward. And they don't think that that's a problem. They don't see that there's an issue with that. That's absolutely insane. We've been doing this. You see some of these transcripts that I had were from 2023. They haven't been able to talk to the witnesses since then to be able to release that. They've only released 2 of these transcripts at this point. I got a stack of them here that are still waiting to be released. And they don't want to release them because this is all part of their scheme to keep the truth that there was not coercion going on with these social media companies. And they need these companies not to do their job now as we start into the 2024 presidential election. And when they talk about the discussion of White House with these media companies, I've got a transcript here from an interview with an Amazon employee where the question is, so just to be clear, it was during the Trump White House that Amazon and other tech companies were first asked to work on the issue of rooting out COVID misinformation? Answer, yes, that's my recollection. Because we were in a pandemic, and it was incumbent on our government, along with these social media companies, along with health experts, along with cable news, along with members of Congress who, if we can recall, voted for funding to support the vaccine, all working together to try and stop the deaths of Americans and people around the world. Did that information and what we knew about the vaccine change over time? Of course it did. I can recall when we were told you could only transmit it by hand to hand or by touch. We didn't even know it was airborne initially, and that changed. But the work of our government is important, and we don't want these social media companies chilled in their own rooting out of misinformation and disinformation, particularly from our adversaries, as we go into this next election. And so, Mr. Chairman, once again, for all things congressional, can we move on to another hearing to discuss some weaponizations of other areas? I've given you 2 or 3 other topics that we can talk about. In other committees, they will at least give a member of the minority 1 hearing at least on a topic that we can agree on, that is weaponization. Let's not continue the weaponization by Congress of social media companies. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields.